We're already seeing the effects that dwindling resources are having on organisations. These effects are going to grow, particularly as the human population and appetite for resources continues to grow. The biggest issues arise in relation to resources that are finite and diminishing, where demand for those resources are increasing. Remember that prices are driven by the theory of supply and demand. As supply decreases, prices will go up. This also applies if supply stays the same, but demand increases, then prices go up. So where we have supply decreasing and demand increasing, we really do have a perfect storm for significant impacts on organisations and society as a whole. Toyota can be considered a leader in cost efficiency and being on the front foot with respect to adapting to dwindling resources. In particular, reductions in energy and water use in vehicle production has been a focus for Toyota over the past 10 to 20 years. What Toyota realised was not only were these resources diminishing and prices starting to increase, but by being more efficient with these production inputs, the cost efficiency savings are quite considerable. We also need to consider supply of locally sourced resources, particularly oil, because when local production falls or cannot keep up with increased domestic demand, imports will need to increase, which also drives costs up for local organisations. So as accountants, we need to analyse the potential impacts on costs or sales, any potential operational restrictions, as well as conducting cost-benefit analysis for other sources of the particular resource. For example, oil-based fuel could be replaced with hybrid vehicles or biofuels. Coal-powered electricity could be replaced with a renewable energy source such as solar, hydro or wind. For governments, issues relating to diminishing resources are very important, particularly food-based scarcity. This will generally require government to subsidise the local agricultural sector to retain food production domestically, or even organisations that operate within a food-related value chain, such as restaurants or supermarkets, because input prices can increase. Many governments also provide significant fuel subsidies to keep the population civil, as rising fuel or food prices can often lead to riots and civil problems. Distribution companies also require special consideration. They can be impacted because revenues may fall as there is less food-based products to deliver, and on top of this, they are likely to have input cost increases with fuel-related scarcity. Governments also tend to invest heavily to support the agricultural sector in relation to research to determine ways to increase crop yields, getting more yield from less inputs and being able to use less water. Agriculture Victoria, a state government body, has focused on research to increase canola crop yields, with some success, seeing 20% yield increases. But we need to make sure anything we do to increase food production or any other primary industry production is environmentally sustainable. If we negatively impact the environment, we can end up with a situation that is even worse in the future. For example, in Australia's Murray-Darling Basin, massive amounts of local vegetation were removed to provide land for farming. However, native vegetation has evolved to cope with salt levels in the groundwater. Crops were unable to do this and ended up dying off. So now the land is useless for farming, and in many places even native plants cannot grow without significant rehabilitation. This brings us to biodiversity, which is the cornerstone to natural systems. Messing with the balance can have disastrous effects. Reducing biodiversity can cause issues related to crops, if we refer back to our Murray-Darling Basin salinity issue, and reputational issues. For example, the more recent focus on deforestation in Indonesia related to palm oil plantations and production and orangutans. So, what is the solution to all this? Be innovative. Be on the frontier of innovation and think ahead. Create yourself a blue ocean market, or deal with potential input costs increases sooner than later to gain a competitive edge. To recap, accepting that a decline in resources is inevitable is essential, followed by creative and innovative plans to move to more sustainable raw materials, production processes, and consumption patterns. Accountants can provide valuable advice and support throughout this process, but to do so, we need to be aware of how important food, water, energy, and other resources are within our value chains and society, so that the impact of today's decisions are carefully thought through.